The Equity Challenge, to identify circumstances and conditions in school systems that contribute to inequitable student academic and social emotional outcomes. Changing these conditions reduces the failure of student learning. As a result, the learning experience honors and cultivates students' strengths and their linguistic, social, and cultural identities. The California Equity Improvement Grant Project, launched in September of 2018, forged a coalition of school districts and administrators from the offices of education in San Diego and Kern County to focus on a program titled Improving Educational Equity for African American and English learner students. Through this project, school teams engage in a continuous improvement process equity model to thoughtfully and strategically address issues of equity and support students to move towards academic and social emotional success.
Good morning, good morning. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here.
We too have a similar charge in Kern County.
During its two-day equity launch, participants from more than half a dozen schools in both counties took a close look at some overarching equity concepts. One example of this is the idea of implicit or unconscious bias and how it shows up in our school systems. The idea is for them to discover and then reflect on what this means for their own work by going through a series of discussions and activities.
This is another activity that you can do with your staff that not only builds trust in the room, which we're going to continue to work on here together today.
The goal of the facilitators? To help participants deepen their understanding of equity concepts such as implicit bias, privilege, and the importance of starting with the crucial question, why are we striving for equity in our schools and districts? Guiding participants through 2 days of discussions, facilitators, blending research with everyday examples of equity issues.
I am passionate about the work of equity because I love our kids. And when I think about my work in the Bay Area, for example, there were kids in schools who were not reading in 4th and 5th grade. That's an equity issue. By the time kids leave kindergarten, they should be reading, and it's our job to make sure that that happens.
I am a San Diego native, born and raised here. I try to mentor families, I try to mentor principals, I talk to children all of the time. My professional experience here in San Diego, both as educator, as a teacher, and as a principal and assistant superintendent, has always been to ensure that they have academic success.
Each and every kid, no matter what their socioeconomic status, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their religion, none of that is a factor in how students are able to achieve.
One essential component of the launch was the facilitators' willingness to be vulnerable by sharing their own stories.
So I went after school and got help from my Spanish professor every single day. And one time, one of my good friends who was on the boys basketball team, he was also black, came in to get some help as well. And immediately, our professor got up and locked her purse in the cabinet. Why I remember this one specifically is because this was somebody that I respected, a teacher no less, who had treated somebody else I really respected with low expectations and a lack of love.
We want to have participants actually feel, right, and really think about and reflect on their own contribution to inequitable practices and to really understand the complexities when discussing equities.
Our facilitators used the 6-circle model to develop and guide participants in our equity launch because it shows many things to consider when fostering an environment conducive to equity in our schools. 3 areas of technical systems above the green line and the 3 relational areas below it, all of which are interconnected and vital to a healthy system. Finally, participants learned about the idea of a 7th circle. This model recognizes the systemic oppression is at play and negatively affects the dynamic interplay of working above and below the green line, unless there is an intentional focus to examine how bias, conscious and unconscious, may be impacting schools.
There are two different aspects going on when we're facilitating, and something that we want them to think about in their systems, which is that technical piece or the instructional piece, the design piece, and then also there's the below the green line, which is that relational piece, how we communicate with each other, our group identity, our individual identity, and how we agree to be together. I think that during the facilitation was interesting, watching people shift, like, okay, wait, so now we're talking about relational stuff, going back and forth between those two, and I thought that was interesting in terms of when we were facilitating, watching the shift that people were making.
Even before coming in, I thought I already knew everything there was I needed to know. And then I found out, oh, that's not true.
I'm excited. I think that this is an interesting way of looking at things. I think as a counselor, it's comfortable for me. I don't know that everyone feels that way.
You know, I was just thinking, and I was just talking to my team, that it's just so complex. It's just so difficult, reason being that we're all different.
The participants most of the time have this urgency of wanting to fix a system. So there's this urgency of like, but I need this practical application like right now. Why are we doing a privilege walk? I'm already here at this equity grant. It means I'm equity minded.
If your family ever had to move because they could not afford the rent, please take one step back.
The Privilege Walk, a simple, eye-opening activity that shows how earned and unearned privileges affect our lives and possibly the lives of our students and families.
If you were encouraged to attend college by your parents, please take one step forward.
If you were ever afraid of violence or were the victim of violence because of your race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, please take one step back. Without moving, take a minute and just look around. Find somebody that is in a similar place to where you are, because I'd like this to be as safe as possible so that you can really express how you're feeling.
The guilt part, I think, to me is, like, I'm so attracted to people who have struggled, and like I told my wife when I first met her, and like I know you look at like what you've been through is a weakness, but I look at it as a strength, and I look like where I come from is a weakness, you know, because I just see you as a fighter, you know, like no matter what comes up, and like you have every right to just be so mad at the world.
And it made me think about my students and how do they view me? Do they view me as more privileged than I view myself? And I've never really felt like, oh, I'm a privileged person. So that was it was shocking and uncomfortable.
You know, I've told a couple, this whole thing to me is it's exhausting. You know, this is every day. It's my life since I was a child. You know, you know, now you say, oh, Black Lives Matter and this, and I was like, and people are like, oh my goodness. So I was like, what are you talking about? I've lived this since I was a child. I can't, no matter what happens, I walk out the door, I'm going to be a black male. It doesn't matter that I have a doctorate. It doesn't matter I have 2 masters, the cops still stop me and I don't get the ticket. You know, it still happens. You know, I still have to choose my words. And the primary thing is I cannot be angry ever in public. You know, I can't cry in public. I have to do all these things in private because I have to put a persona that is always has to be pleasing in some way. People say, do you try to understand the perspective of those that are being biased. If I don't understand that perspective, I would never even be where I am today. I have to understand the perspective of those that are biased against me so I can try to maneuver through the system that I feel doesn't want me there.
It's not our choices, like someone said, it's the system that set this up, right? And so our work is to change that system.
Listening to their responses is a skill and it's a challenge.
I challenge my kids to be the ones to make the change. To be the ones. And don't forget about the ones in the back. He and I were in the back. She was in the back. We turned out okay. So we can't forget about the kids in the back.
Intense discussions also revolved around key equity themes such as relationship building, implicit bias, and that key question, why are we personally invested in the work of equity.
Why is the why important? How does that change how we lead? How does that change how we communicate with our stakeholders? And why is it so essential that we are really clear with our why and clear in communicating it?
As first-year teachers, or maybe just when we don't know what we're doing, we focus a lot on the what. And well, what am I teaching? What do I do? What's the curriculum? What's this? What's that? But to be student-focused and to really drive, we have to always remember that why.
And if we're not constantly communicating the why, people are coming up with our why for us.
Eventually we get a student that they say nothing and do nothing because we never allow their why to be present.
A central focus of equity discussions, implicit bias, the attitudes or stereotypes that unconsciously affect our perceptions, actions, and decisions.
We also believe that in education, it might not be talked about as much, especially what it looks like in the classroom, at the school level, at the district level, and at the county level. How is it showing up? And if we really want to have an equitable environment and an environment where we have some outcomes for our students that are positive, we need to start looking internally, remember that lead self, and then also our organization.
I think if you ask most of our teachers, they're going to say no bias exists in our school. I am not biased. And I do think part of that is that a lot of people think racism and bias are the same thing. And I think a lot of teachers will say, well, I'm not racist, therefore I'm not biased, therefore this work doesn't need to be done. And so I think if we can get people to start to have those conversations, I think that's going to be a major step.
We're all biased. Every single one of us. We all have bias. We sometimes notice it. Most of the time we don't. Bias doesn't mean we're racist. That's a kind of a total fallacy and almost this thing that happens that we get defensive about, like I'm not biased because we assume it means racist, but that's not what it means. Our brain is wired that way. We have a lot of information coming our way all of the time. And our brain has to make certain decisions about what information is important, what information can you use, making those connections in that schema automatically. We're on automatic a lot of times. That's why many times when you're driving home, you don't even remember that you drove home. You're just home all of a sudden. You know, as much as I was trying to be the vessel and kind of give some examples, I noticed that it was difficult for the room to open up and see the biases in themselves. They were very quick to talk about the biases that exist in the system. But I know that a facilitation challenge is to get them to really open up and discuss themselves.
The third and equally crucial topic, relationship building within and across the teams as they discuss the complexities of equity. Intentional time was dedicated to establishing and growing trust so that school teams could engage in honest and authentic conversations about their personal and collective experiences regarding equity.
Considering that 2 different counties were in the room, we had to create enough of a relationship between counties and schools who don't know each other in order for whole group shareouts to be meaningful and for people to be vulnerable enough to share.
When teachers are pronouncing names or other students are pronouncing names, sometimes there will be conversations of, oh, what did you say your name was? Or they'll just mispronounce it and not think twice about it. So to stop and just remind them, this is their name, this is what they are called. Like, that is the only name you are allowed to call them. You don't get to call them any other names, you know, just building the respect of the person. And so that's just the start of building equity, just realizing, oh, that's their name. I can't make up a nickname unless they specifically tell me.
We needed to do that to create that general safe space.
I'm trying to capture what happened in there, but I just know that because we're all human, we all have different experiences. It's just a challenge.
I'm nervous. I'm nervous how the rest of the school is going to see this and take this and where we go next.
If you think of just human nature is messy. The human condition is complex and there's no way to simplify it at all. So just to take this big task and then improve upon it every year that I'm teaching is amazing.
I look forward to learning about what our participants are learning and also what they realize they didn't know.
For our folks to be able to walk away and say, not only do I understand equity deeper than I did before I walked into this space, but I also have a way in which I can work through a problem. So I can identify the problem, I can come up with some change ideas that are research-based. I can try on some strategies. So going through that entire cycle of continuous improvement, I think is powerful. And those two coupled together is what makes this project different than a lot of projects.
If we are going to be equity-centered leaders with the responsibility of creating a system that ensures each and every child gets what they need to be successful, we're going to have to do a lot of work on ourselves.
These are going to be tough conversations. There are built-in layers of complexity in our schools that prohibit kids from advancing. And we have to call those out. So when I say if we do this work right, it's not going to be easy.
I'm hoping that whatever framework we create, whatever goal we decide to achieve, I'm hoping it'll be a success.